Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It is Monday, December 18th. Derek Van Riper here with Eno Saris. We hope you enjoyed the Working in Baseball series that went up last week in place of the usual pods. It was a great opportunity for us to not only share those conversations, but to let some more of the offseason happen. Things worked out perfectly. We have an amazing rundown for today.
Stuff to talk about.
Real stuff.
If we'd really tried to stretch out like 2 or 3 podcasts last week, would have been like, one thing happened today. Let's talk about it for 45 minutes.
Thankfully, transactions have occurred, and these are sort of the rundown is built more in order of how interesting these things are in the broader sense, not chronological. Never is, right? I think the most interesting that happened in the last week is Tyler Glasnow getting traded to the Dodgers and signing an extension. So 4 more years beyond this one for Glasnow. The trade was Tyler Glasnow plus Manuel Margot going to the Dodgers for Ryan Pepiot and Johnny DeLuca. And it felt a little light, but the thing about it is, well, I think it felt light on the Rays side. I don't think they got enough back. But maybe it's because I always have that look of wonder in my eyes when I watch Tyler Glasnow. I'm just in awe of what could be. And because I'm such a notorious optimist, I just felt like they could have found a better offer for Glasnow. It was only 1 year, of course, at $25 million. So
yeah, I think that's the key. And the $25 million means that he's not super underpaid. It's kind of, 1 year at cost. In fact, the extension was like $4 and $110 at new money.
That didn't seem that. I thought that was light too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that has to do, I think, with the obvious thing, which is, what's the over under on the number of innings you think the Rays, the Dodgers will get out of Glasnow in 5 years. I mean, you might put the over under at 500. And so, I think that's why you're paying, you're paying for the starts you get out of him. And you're paying for the upside, the fact that you can get an ace, especially if you get an ace in October. You get a guy that nasty who might even be your number 2 or number 3, once the dust settles on this offseason. I mean, that's what you're paying for. And the reason the Dodgers do it, for anybody who's sort of skeptical about how this shook down and skeptical about Glasnow's health and, skeptical about all of this, the reason they can do this is because they can create another Ryan Pepiot. At least that's how they feel, I think. And so if you have a pipeline, you got Emmett Sheehan, you got Bobby Miller, you got Michael Grove, and you got guys coming out. They got guys that I was like, who's this? Kyle Hurt and oh man, there was some other name that I was like, I don't think people talk about this guy, but he has like a 12 K9 in AAA. Like he's like ready to go, and so I think that I gotta let my dog in. He's like whining outside. I don't know why. Like, hold on real quick.
Okay.
If you are the Dodgers and you think that you can create another Ryan Pepiot, then what you want is Glasnow. Roll the dice on Glasnow every time you can get him in there. And then when he's not in there, you get your Pepiot part 2 to fill in. So I think that some of the transaction analysis math is off when you think you have a pipeline that good.
Yeah, who you're dealing with, club control, actual salaries, all of those things are legitimate factors. And I think the extension seeming light to me, again, as maybe Tyler Glasnow's biggest believer. I didn't know I was that person. It's the workloads. It's the year-over-year workloads. So there's a good boy getting involved in the show. It's the year-over-year workloads. Tyler Glasnow had a career high. Yeah. Career high innings last year for a big league season anyway, with 120. He's never thrown more than that in the big leagues before. So that's where a lot of the concerns come from. He's done it. Some of the minor league workloads
you gotta add some of those in. I mean, he's had 140s and 150s.
Yeah, like 2016 split between AAA and the big leagues with Pittsburgh was 134. 2017 between AAA and the big leagues, 155 and a third. So I think when people say Tyler Glasnow never stays healthy, it's an overcorrection similar to the overcorrection of Blake Snell doesn't pitch deep enough in games. Yes, there is injury risk here, but I think it's over-exaggerated to a slight degree with Tyler Glasnow. I think when you look at what he is on a per-inning basis, when you consider that he might be replacing Clayton Kershaw's place in the rotation. Like Kershaw is a Dodger, maybe no more, right? Their depth enables them to take this kind of risk because if injuries are still a problem, they have quality options that can fill in. If injuries are less of a concern, if he gets back to the 150, 160, 170 range for a few of these seasons, he's probably a 5-WAR pitcher even without getting to 200 innings. That's the kind of stuff and results that Tyler Glasnow gets. So I think that's a huge part of the calculation here. I'm curious to see how everybody treats him in their drafts. I would have to imagine the ADP is ticked up a little bit already since the move to Los Angeles. We know Tampa Bay is a great place to pitch, but going to an even better team, I would imagine, drives up interest in Glasnow even further.
Yeah, you'd think more wins, maybe. The Rays win a lot of games, but there's also lesser opponents for Glasnow, I would think. There's a lot of things to like about him as a player after this deal. I think there's one last note that's kind of interest here is you got Shohei Ohtani in 2025, and let's say they signed Yoshinobu Yamamoto as well. I think there's a real possibility they go to a 6-man rotation. I don't know if it's this year or next year or both. But say in 2025, you go to a 6-man rotation and, that pitching less leads to fewer injuries. I mean, that's just sort of easy math right there. But there's also math out there that shows that over the course of the season, every inning adds just a slight uptick in home run rate. So pitchers are better if they pitch less. So you could have a Dodgers team that says we are such a super team, like we can actually come up with 6 really good pitchers and we're going to keep them all healthier and they're going to be better because we're going to rest them more. And we're going to kind of go to the more Japanese model where every pitcher kind of, pitches once a week, and that'll all be great for the fantasy players. They'll be annoyed by that. You never get like a 2-start pitcher in LA if that's the case, but it could be an interesting way to sort of keep those injuries down. Maybe that's what they're thinking is, the Rays thinking is we're going to collect all these pitchers. And so if half of them are injured, we still got half a good roster. What if the Dodgers are like, we're going to get all these pitchers and keep them healthy?
Yeah, going to the Rays side of this for a minute, Ryan Pepiot was someone I was pretty interested in the brief time we saw him in the big leagues this year. I think it was an oblique injury that slowed him down throughout the first half. Didn't get a ton of time with the Dodgers. It was 42 innings at the big league level, 22 and change at AAA. The thing that had really changed with him, though, was control. The walk rate, both at AAA and during his time with the Dodgers, was a career best. 5.4% walk rate at AAA, 3.1% during that time with the Dodgers. Even if you want to cut that back to 7 or 8%, compared to the double-digit walk rates we saw from him throughout his time in the lower levels of the minors, that was a pretty big skills improvement for Pepiot in a limited volume. So I'm wondering how much they see similarities between Pepiot and Zach Eflin, who they sought out last offseason, at least this version of Pepiot, or if they see something that can be kind of Frankenstein together where these new skills with control paired with overall really good stuff could lead them to yet another undervalued arm. I mean, I was intrigued before, but the fact that the Rays took him back as kind of the key player in this deal only bumps up that interest further.
Yeah, I think that one thing that people are sort of like, oh, well, you made these adjustments and you made these changes and his command is better. And I don't know if I believe it. I understand that he's made some changes and he's made some adjustments, but when it comes to stats, a big change in walk rate like that, or a big change in location plus, which he did go from a 91, which is reliever level in 2022 to 104 last year, which is absolutely doable as a starter. Like, I just don't believe that jump, especially given that you had these command grades on him all the way up that are not good. Like that was the thing on him was 40 to 45 command on Fangraphs. Like below average command was. You have these bad walk rates all the way through the minor leagues. So I'm not ready to believe that the walk rates are better. What I will give him is a plus changeup, maybe even an elite level changeup. I'll give him an above average breaking ball. I think this hard cutter that he's found is good enough. And with 94 miles an hour, he has the velo. So I could see the Rays doing something where even if the command regresses a little bit, the slider percentage goes up, and he starts to steal some strikes with that slider. And the reason I kind of believe that is he showed, he showed okay command by Location Plus on the slider in both years. That's the one that's been the same, and so you've got like this larger sample now of being able to command the slider okay. And it makes sense. It's a cutter, it's a hard slider. It's a kind of a low movement pitch. So he's got this low movement pitch. You say, all right, you know what? He's got all the building blocks to be a great starter, like an elite change, a plus breaking ball, and 94 miles an hour. That's all the building blocks to be a starter. And if the command regresses, we're going to up the usage of the cutter and steal some strikes that way. And he can be a little bit wild with the four seam. That's fine. If he can have the cutter when he needs it, we'll find a way to get by, even if he walks 10% of the guys. So, I mean, for them also is just really attractive that we could have a good starter on, a $700,000 salary. So that's a big part of it. There was a funny piece by Michael Bauman on Fangraphs today where it's titled, I know when the Rays are going to trade Ryan Pepiot. And he was basically like, in 2.5 years, in 3 years, they're going to trade Ryan Pepiot, because they've done that on 8 of the 10 starters that he had on his list. It was like everybody but David Price and Alex Cobb, and David Price is David Price, and Alex Cobb got hurt right in the window when they would have traded him. So and that's actually Glasnow kind of got hurt in that same window too. So, they're going to keep him for 3 years. I bet you they get 2 good years out of him. Predicting which of those years will be the best years may be a little bit difficult. Like, are you all in on him? Like in drafts, like is there a would you rather, or like do we have some early ADPs? I mean, none of them so would factor in the fact that now he probably has a rotation spot, right?
Right. So I just looked at ADPs from the past week, like 6 drafts. The range is 181 to 202. Average pick is like 193. Okay. I don't think he's going to go up a whole lot from there. The would you rather actually within the same rotation is Pepiot versus Aaron Savali. They're like 8 picks apart.
I'm taking Savali.
See, I think I'm taking Pepiot. I think you
just want the upside.
The stuff is the ceiling is higher for me stuff wise. Like the way you 94 with the fastball, excellent changeup, potential plus breaking ball if that slider comes together. That's more than what Savali brings to the table.
Savali's like a spin it guy where he's got like 3 or 4 breaking balls, a poor fastball. He's a spin guy.
I mean. If you want to go outside the Rays, you're going to get a whole bunch of different guys that are in this range, because this is the fun spot to shop for pitchers.
So what else? Throw him else at me,
The other would you rather's Hunter Brown versus Ryan Pepiot. I'm on Hunter Brown. Yeah, that one. That one's actually kind of easy. Bryce Miller versus Ryan Pepiot.
Bryce Miller.
I've been getting really excited about the Mariners. Every time we talk about them, everything we look at is just like.
I want the other sentence you didn't say.
Yeah, I'm really tired. The kid was up for 2 hours last night in the middle of the night.
Oh boy, yeah.
Just up. You just wanted to party from 12:15 to 2. So
lovely.
My brain's not working. Brian Wu also in that range.
I'm taking Wu.
Mason Miller.
Oh, I'll take Pepe over Miller.
Yeah, just the innings. I mean, Mason Miller, as we know, could be a closer instead of an actual starter, so you get that. How about Evaldi? Nathan Evaldi versus Ryan Pepiot.
Evaldi. I mean, I'll just be happy and take the first 4 months and then, have an itchy trigger finger when he's throwing 93.
I think I might be Pepiot over Evaldi too.
Whoa. All right.
Pepiot over Braxton Garrett for me too. Get Braxton Garrett goes in this range.
Garrett to me is there's too much Miles Michaelis where it's like you think you know what you got and you think it looks beautiful, but it's a low stuff, high command thing, and a little thing goes wrong, and he's Miles Michaelis in the bad year. I feel like. There's also some interesting names on the Rays depth chart behind him, where you've got Zach Littell, Shane Baz, and Taj Bradley, all kind of competing for spots with Pepiot. I'd say Eflin and Savali. That's another thing. I think Pepiot has another option left. He does.
There's a performance risk situation where you think he could actually end up back at AAA for a stretch this year if he's
they did it with Taj Bradley. I mean, when you have options and you have to win as many games as you can in that division, I feel like Eflin and Savali are in. Zach Littell is probably out of options. He has 0 options. So I feel like Littell is in. Even as I'm not very excited about him, I'd be way more excited about Pepiot. I'm not saying pick Littell over Pepiot. What I'm just saying is Littell's in, to start the season at least. And so then you have Pepiot, Baz, and Bradley fighting for 2 spots, which Baz is coming off surgery. Maybe you slow walk him. Bradley you want him to find those secondaries. I'm a little worried we've got a Taiwan Walker situation with Taj Bradley, where the fastball is the best pitch and he's like struggling to find the secondary pitches that fit it. But I'd be more excited about Shane Baz and Taj Bradley if I knew they were in, I think, than Pepiot. So, but I think that's a pretty fun group. Pepiot, Baz, and Bradley is going to produce at least one kind of almost like league winner type pitcher. He's not going to win you the league by himself, but one of those pitchers is going to be amazing, I think. Picking which one is going to be.
Yeah, Baz goes a little earlier than the others. He's going around pick 172, so it's same range, but
all of last year, it's just hard to project the innings. But in terms of his stuff when he's in there, it's pretty exciting.
But that was a September of 22 Tommy John, so he's getting this extra time to recover, and it's not like Walker Buehler. It's the second Tommy John for Walker Buehler. So I look at the difference in price between Buehler and Baz. I know Buehler was really good for a long time before this second Tommy John. I think Shane Baz makes a lot of sense value-wise, whereas Buehler is still taking on quite a bit of risk, given that you're spending a top 100 pick to get him. Like maybe by the time we get to the end of spring training, everything will look normal with Buehler and it's full steam ahead then. But I think right now, given that we didn't see either one of these guys pitch in 23, I'd rather go later if I'm going to take a chance on someone with that risk profile.
Yeah, I don't know. So the pitchers who have had Tommy John surgery twice, we've got Eovaldi, Jameson Taillon, Daniel Hudson, Joaquim Soria, Chris Capuano. Those are the success stories. The 5 who struggled, Josh Johnson was pretty much done afterwards. Chris Medlin, I don't know if the Chris Medlin, that's not quite the Walker Buehler situation. You know what I mean? Like Chris Medlin seemed like he was kind of always hurt, right?
He had shoulder stuff, I think, on top of the elbow stuff, if I remember correctly, too.
Jarrett Parker. Chris Medlin only had 4 years in between. Jarrett Parker had 5 years in between. Brandon Beachy had 2 years in between. I mean, that's the one where you're just like, that doesn't seem like it has much to do with Walker Buehler at all.
Yeah.
Brian Wilson had 9 years in between.
I also here's the other.
Not a great list to be on. I mean, honestly, your best case scenario is Nathan Eovaldi.
No, and maybe I'm being too optimistic about injuries, even thinking or saying it, but also rehabbing all the way back in 2024 compared to 10, 15 years ago, things are different now, right? We've hopefully, it seems like the medical community has advanced, the recovery has improved a bit.
Our biomechanical tracking has advanced, so like maybe we know some better stuff about how to keep pitchers healthy. I mean, theoretically at least.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know. I think there's a better chance that Buehler, for at least a little while, pitches the way he did before he was hurt than some of those guys didn't have a chance because it happened so long ago that it was more of a roll of the dice than it is now. There's a little more to the whole recovery process now. I think the other part of this trade, we'll move on momentarily, that's kind of interesting is Johnny DeLuca, because he was really going to struggle to find a lot of time with the Dodgers, but the Rays, I think, can afford to find at least a big side platoon role for him. Is that possible now that they've cleared Margot? I mean, I think there are a lot of rumors about Randy Rosarena potentially being on the move, but I wouldn't think they move unless they get something they really like. Luke Raley kind of fits into a floating DH mix right now. So if it's a Rosarena, Lowe, Syrian center, and Raley, DeLuca's a righty, so he'd be a small side platoon. I don't know why I thought DeLuca was a lefty, but is it too small?
I got a name for you. He has a lot in common with Isaac Paredes.
All right. I like that.
A low strikeout rate and a really high pulled fly ball rate. So, even though he's 5'11", 196 listed on Fangraphs, I feel like you're talking about a guy who's going to make the most out of his power and could be like a 20, 25 home run hitting guy, that makes a lot of contact. I think they're trying to, make more contact as a team. And, what is his role in the short term? I wouldn't bet on anything than just basically replacing Manny Margot. But I think they basically made a trade where they're like, hey, can we have cheaper versions of the two guys we have?
I think the thing for me that could be a little bit different is DeLuca's power and speed might play up a little bit more than Margot's. So for our purposes, he might be more exciting. Margot could be the better real life player in the long run, but I think DeLuca could fill a similar role. It's interesting, and maybe the Rays aren't done, and that's going to be part of the story here as well. And I think you implied it before with that interest in Yamamoto, the Dodgers could still add to that rotation, and they're already in pretty good shape with the moves they've made. They'd be in amazing shape if they went ahead and added one more to the equation. Let's get to Jung Hoo Lee. We talked about him a bit on the 3-0 show last week. 6 years, $113 million. Let's focus more on the fantasy angle here. The production in the KBO is impressive, but the power is definitely the main question. Like how much hard contact is Jung Hoo Lee going to make against major league pitching, right? He did well against KBO fastballs, as we talked about last week. There's a pretty big gap velocity-wise, probably about 4 to 5 miles per hour on average compared to major league fastballs. So if you were trying to guess the scouting report against Jung Hoo Lee, I'm going to guess you're going to see a lot of fastballs early on. High and inside fastballs to see if he can catch up to MLB velocity. If he handles that, the game plan will change. This is a pretty big commitment from the Giants, so they must see some things they really like as far as what he brings to the table. And even if he doesn't hit for a lot of power, how well do you think the hit tool and the OBP skills are going to translate in his first season in San Francisco?
I mean, with a swinging strike rate of 3% in Korea, if you look at Ha-Seong Kim's K rates, they actually ported over pretty well. He was Ha-Seong Kim played in the same parks against the same competition at roughly the same time because they were, I think they were teammates, at some point. And Ha-Seong Kim, yes, I mean, in 2020 he had a 11% strikeout rate over there, and he came over. He's had a 19.6. But if you look over the course of Ha-Seong Kim's history in KBO, he had higher strikeout rates, as high as 19.8% his rookie year. He kind of settled in around 13%. So you have this 13 to 19% conversion for Ha-Seong Kim. What you've got for Jung Hoo Lee is like 5s and 6s. So, in terms of strikeout rate. So I think we could see a 10% strikeout rate from him. I do think there's going to be an adjustment period. I'm also worried that he pulls the ball. I think that's good. And in fact, that he's able to keep this high of a contact rate while getting the ball out in front. So maybe he'll have to adjust where he's fighting off major league fastballs at first, right? And hitting them the other way. But he's if you've got that intense of a bat to ball skill, I feel like you're still going to make contact, right? It's just going to be, are you going to make a contact out in front and hit it for power, or are you just going to kind of spray the ball? So I would assume that he's going to kind of spray the ball. and I'm going to give him something like a 280 to 290 batting average with like 10 to 12 homers and 5 to 10 stolen bases. And that's the sort of player I can see. And he may not hit the ground running with those numbers either, but with enough balls in play, I feel like, the lottery tickets will keep him above 250, 260. Plus he has a pretty good eye too.
Yeah, and that line you described is almost exactly what Steamer has projected for.
Yeah,
Jung Hoo Lee.
A little bit lower on the power, I think.
A little lower on the power, which is fine. It's an above average player. It's like 15% better than league average by WRC plus. If he ends up being even an average defender in center field, the Giants are probably happy with that.
That's a 3 to 4 win player.
There's also the possibility of more. The other part of this that I think is kind of interesting is like if you're Jung Hoo Lee, like there's a velo difference between the KBO and Major League Baseball.
Winter,
you're training on high velocity machines every day in the winter until the season starts. I know it's not exactly the same, but the technology is getting better. You and I saw a pitching machine when we were in Nashville, and it was throwing Justin Verlander's arsenal when we were standing behind it.
It was enough to make my innards shrink.
Yeah, I was uncomfortable. I was worried about the net in front of me. I was like,
is this going to come through the net? Like, it was pretty intense. Just sitting there, you're like, dang. Justin Verlander's good.
People hit this ever. Yeah. So I think there's like that aspect where look, he knows. The Giants know. Everybody knows who's involved here. He'll get a chance to work on that long before he's in the box in San Francisco.
Real quick. I've got their card here. Losny, Losny, Losny Sports USA, big data pitching machine. In case you're looking for a pitching machine that it could possibly be cheaper than Traject. I don't know, but it's very much like Traject. They were right next to each other, competing with each other. Yeah. And they were both impressive.
Eugene, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
It was very nice of him to show us his big machine.
Yeah, it was awesome. And they had an app where you could like adjust all the settings and set it up to basically face any pitcher that you wanted. Really, really cool stuff. Had like this kind of screen that made it render a pitcher's mechanics as the ball was being thrown from the machine too. Very, very cool stuff. Lee's fantasy value. Definitely like a filler type guy for me. Kind of gets drafted like a 4th or 5th outfielder in the NFBC right now. The earliest pick in the last week, 226 overall, so still relatively affordable. I've seen some tweets from around the industry suggesting that the outfield gets really thin later on, in part because teams mix and match and share roles a lot, so you're just not getting enough playing time from a lot of the later outfielders.
That format in particular is weekly, so you really want people who are going to play every day. So there will be a difference. Like in your 12 team, he could be like a last pick, honestly. Like is he in a 12 team? I'm like, I don't know. Like, yeah, if you want to put him on your bench, like if you want to have like one bench pick that, and if it's in daily leagues, you're like, here's a guy I can stick in for some hits, that could be okay. But the reason that he's a little bit more interesting in weekly leagues is I do think that the Giants, despite all their mixing and matching in the past, have been really missing like an everyday player that can play center field. That's why they pushed this number higher than anybody had. Everybody had it sort of 60, 70, 80 million. They went to 120 that they have to pay after the posting fee. So I think honestly, he's like, if there's a lot hanging on this, you have to think about their GM, just got a 1-year extension and pretty much is hanging on by a thread, and he just spent $112 million on this guy. I think that they're going to put him out there and they're going to play him every day. And he's 25 and they need a center fielder.
I think that's where he can make up some ground. I think Jung Hoo Lee can be better in weekly formats than people expect relative to projection because the volume and the playing time will be there consistently. I think it's interesting too. Fangraphs has a 60 on his speed, and he hasn't stolen a ton of bases in the KBO, but he's been pretty efficient.
When he's coming off of ankle surgery, and there's other people who think he's actually not that fast. So
also with the new,
but his nickname is grandson of the wind, and there was questions about who was faster, him or his dad. So
It would just be really funny if a guy that was stealing 10 to 12 bags most years in the KBO comes over with the new major league rules that were put in last year.
Steals
It's
18.
25 or 30 or something. Like, wow, I guess it really is a lot easier to steal bases here with these new rules. But I do think as a depth outfielder, deeper leagues especially, I'm interested in Lee, even though San Francisco is a difficult place to hit. I don't think his game was power anyway. So if you've got a good power base, he fits really well. Cheap average is hard to find.
It's true.
Here's a signing that happened almost 2 weeks ago. We were listening to Sweet Meg when this one broke. Eduardo Rodríguez gets a 4-year deal with the Diamondbacks. And at first, there was a moment where it looked like he was going to Cincinnati. And you and I, amidst the music, were like, ooh, that's not a good place for Eduardo Rodríguez. Play a sad song for Eduardo because Great American Ballpark is not going to be kind to him. And like 2 songs later, it was actually the Diamondbacks. And then we both thought, this is good. Play a happy song. Get everyone dancing again. Eduardo Rodríguez is going to a place where he can have a little bit of success again. The difference, though, between Comerica in Detroit and Chase Field, even though Chase Field's not the old Chase Field pre-Humidor where it was a big-time hitter's park, it's still a slight downgrade for him. But it's a team upgrade. So I wonder if the team upgrade ultimately offsets most of the park change for his home starts.
He's just
laboring.
He's not my guy. I'm trying to say nice things about him because he's obviously had a decent track record. He's coming off a decent year. But, people have to remember the 4.74 ERA in 2021 with Boston, the 4.71 in 2016. There were some really boring seasons in between, a 4.19 in 2017. So for his career, we have 1,100 innings with a 4 ERA. Like I can say all I want about his stuff and his command and this and that. I feel like that's who he is. He's just like a 4 ERA guy. Sometimes, the bigger the sample, the more ERA actually starts to be something you can use, So what a 4.03 ERA, a 4.12 Sierra, like, that's who he is. He's a 4 ERA guy. He's fine. I guess they can depend on innings, with him. But the knee was a big deal once. The knee was that was why he was traded from Baltimore to Boston.
Yep,
was the knee, I believe. So I don't know. Does the knee maybe the knee is fine now? But I feel like. You have a guy who's kind of lower stuff, more command, and you have this old reoccurring knee condition. All it takes is for the knee to flare up, and then all of a sudden the command isn't quite there, and then it's just either he's hurt or he's inconsistent with results. So he's not my type of player. He does have a lot of pitches, which is something I've said I liked in the past, but it's not actually that many. If you talk about more than 10%, it's 4 pitches, but 2 are fastballs. And the sinker is just really kind of a boring movement. So I don't know, man. He's okay. It's fine. And for that price, actually, for the D-backs, that's $20 million for 80. That's like just buying a middle rotation guy. That's that's what you're not. It's not ace prices.
I think the reason I'm okay with it, I even kind of like it for them. They basically graduated all of that young pitching. It's all kind of part of the big league roster already. And I think we have more questions than answers now about Ryan Nelson.
They graduated, but we don't know what the grades are yet.
Yeah, like Brandon Pfaadt, we talked about it throughout the playoffs. The adjustment sort of started in August, made the move on the rubber, and things started to fall into place for him. I think we can reasonably buy that adjustment. I think if you're saying who's better for 2024, Erod or Pfaadt, I think I'd actually take Pfaadt over Erod. And I don't think I dislike Erod. I think I'm a little more into him than you are, but the price is where it always is. This guy has lived most of his career in the pick 175 to 200 range. He goes in there he goes back to his time in Boston because there used to be more upside. Now it's probably more the stability. And I think given the way his career started, some of the lost time, of course, was due to personal matters. He had the myocarditis, I think, in 2020. So some pretty odd, unforeseen things. It hasn't been his legs that have been a problem for him. So he's been a little more durable than I would have expected based on how his career started. I think he kind of scratches the itch of what they really needed. They needed one more solid starter. Tommy Henry was the only other lefty they really had that could possibly start. So they just had nothing in the organization ready to contribute. It's relative.
One season over 160.
Yeah. And if you look at the last 5 years combined, where do you think Eduardo Rodríguez ranks in innings? And he's missed some time. So
my God, because he missed all of 2020.
So look, where do you think he ranks?
I would say
all pitchers.
Not that well, but yes, he has a 203 in there. So I bet you he ranks like 15th or something.
Let's get the numbers. Eduardo Rodríguez, number 42 in innings since 2019, which
I guess that's relatively durable.
604 and 2/3 innings. So that's more innings than Brandon Woodruff. It's more innings than Blake Snell.
But it's still only 120 innings per season.
That's more innings than Jordan Montgomery.
Wow.
More innings than Verlander during that span.
That's
more than Evaldi.
Weirdly impressive. It's such like we're damning him with faint praise, but this is it's praise at least.
Hey, it's what pitching costs. So
yeah,
I think it's ultimately a pretty good signing for Arizona, even though I'm not going to have him everywhere in fantasy, but he's not necessarily in a void for me either. It could actually work out pretty good, at least in the early part of the deal. Here's a fascinating one. Jeimer Candelario to the Reds? Like, of all the things you could have projected the Reds to do in the winter, I wouldn't have put even a depth infielder on their free agent wish list.
He came in below all the projections. They got a deal on him.
What the heck happened here? Was it one of those things where they thought, we kind of like him, let's just see, and then they're like, oh, hey, we got him. Like, that's
you think
great.
Candelario signed too early?
I thought from the outside looking in that the best market for him was going to be after Matt Chapman was off the board.
Right.
Because if you needed a third baseman, you would prefer Matt Chapman to Jeimer Candelario 10 out of 10 times, right? We've talked about the Matt Chapman hard hit balls not pulling enough of his bad balls in 2023.
Oh, I think I have an answer for you.
What do you think happened?
This is just a steamer projection. It's not gospel. There's other projections. People have different numbers, but his steamer projection is for 1 win. And what we have seen in the past from the market is, and this is becoming more and more true over time, is that WAR is nonlinear, and that teams do not necessarily want to pay $8 million per win for guys that are, or $9 million per win for guys that are going to give you a win to 2 wins. Right. So even if, let's say, he's a 1.5 win player, and by WAR $sign, you spit out $15 million a year, like, I could see teams being like, yeah, but we still would be below average at third base. Like, why would I pay $15 a year to be below average at third base? Whereas the Reds, I think they almost bought pitching with this $15 million. Like, to maybe the idea is we pay Jeimer 15. Is it Jeimer or Jeimer? Anyway, Candelario.
It's Jeimer, and I'm an idiot because I was sitting with Eric Karabell and Tristan Cockcroft the very first time we were at a fall league game when Candelario was still a fall league player.
Whoa.
And I thought it was Jeimer, and they're like, no, it's Jeimer. And I'm like, no, come on, guys, it's Jeimer. I took a lot of Spanish. And they're like,
right.
No, dude, it's Jeimer. It's like when Eric and Tristan tell you it's Jeimer, it's Jeimer, and it is Jeimer. Like,
that's crazy, but in Spanish it would. Anyway, that's fine. I've only taken 4 years of Duolingo.
It's the J-E. That's a little. You don't see a lot of J-E's in Spanish, actually. That's what got me.
Okay. Yeah, because maybe Jeimer would be J-A-I. Anyway,
it looked more like Jaime. Anyway,
yeah.
Our Spanish names podcast drops in 2024.
The idea here, I think, maybe is to make Jonathan India more expendable. Although he already was expendable.
Another reason not to trade India first, unless you think you're going to pay Candelario more in that scenario. Like, what?
Yeah, right. Why bird in hand bush situation? I guess
this is also bad for Elly De La Cruz. Like, that's short term, because it crowds things up even more on the infield. If
some people were saying Elly to center,
maybe. Okay, Spencer Steer is going to play in the outfield now for sure, right? Like, that's definitely happening.
Yeah.
I mean, the other way to think about it is look at the Reds group of young position players and think about that group similar to the Orioles in terms of depth.
Actually, what are Noel
go trade.
Noelvi, yeah, that's what I'm saying. They bought pitching by making Noelvi Marte or Jonathan India more expendable. Would you let's say you get more for Noelvi Marte on the trade market than Jonathan India?
Yeah.
Which one would you trade? I mean, given that you know you would get more, would you trade Noelvi Marte to get more? And so I'm saying you can trade Noelvi Marte for a guy who has like 3 years of team control left and that you're very excited about, or you can trade Jonathan India for a guy who has like a year or two left and you're a little bit less excited about.
I think I would trade Noelvi Marte in that scenario.
Marte is just a really interesting cat that I can't quite get a read on. He's hit a ball 115.6, which is amazing. And when you look at where numbers like this are most important, raw maximum exit velocity, it's most important with a rookie to understand his power ceiling. Once it's almost like Stuff Plus, where like after you have 5 years of sample, you don't necessarily need to run to the max EV anymore. You know what I mean? Like you kind of, more about this guy. And so, Max EV is the Stuff Plus of hitters, and he has a 115.6, but he's had some real up and down power numbers. He's never had an ISO over 200 since rookie ball in 2019. And so it's like, is he just one of these guys who's always going to tease you and hit the ball really hard sometimes, but not really make the most of his power? It's just and then like, what do you think his pure natural position is? Is he going to actually have defensive value, or are people just faking defensive value early in his career and he's going to end up in the corner outfield or at first base or something like that?
Yeah, the defense is really tough. Like I just haven't seen enough of him to make a strong call on that. The concerns, I guess, coming through the last like 2 seasons have been that for his age, especially, his body's changing really fast, and the general concern was a loss of athleticism. But I don't know, man. How do you lose athleticism and steal 24 bases between AA and the big leagues? He's 24 for 30 as a base stealer. So maybe he's getting
pop your
bigger, but he's still pretty twitchy.
In Dominican Winter League, he popped his hamstring and was hurt. The injuries has been part of the story too.
And maybe he's a guy that plays third for a little while, and by the time he's approaching free agency, he moves across the infield and plays first, which is harder for him to do in Cincinnati, depending on how things play out here in the next couple of seasons.
Especially since Candelario's on the team now.
Right. I thought in Candelario, like landing in Cincinnati is great. If you're going to get a full playing time share in Cincinnati and you have a guy that's got pretty good plate skills and like kind of 20-ish home run power, that plays up in a big way in Cincinnati. He could pop 30 home runs in a full season for the Reds. That's well within range. So it's like, on the one hand, this is great for Jeimer Candelario's value. On the other hand, the fallout of it is really hard to figure out at this moment because it feels like part of a series of moves. But if the exciting player in Marte gets me back a potential like future frontline starter, or even someone who's close to that already, I think you have to entertain that move and do that, because the Reds, as much as we love Hunter Green and Nick Lodolo, there's a lot riding on both of those guys staying healthy. And even if they stayed healthy, they're still probably at least one more quality pitcher short of being a legitimate, dangerous playoff team.
Oh man, this team would be so much better, I think, with a real solid veteran, 1 or 2.
Yeah, I was just thinking about how much I like Luis Castillo in Cincinnati. Just how, as a power pitcher that gets a ton of ground balls, like he fits. Like that's the guy. Like that. And they had the chance. They had the chance. They could have extended him or tried to extend him. They traded him. They got a lot back. They did really well in that trade, and that's part of why they moved this rebuild along really quickly. Was making that move. But now, like, how do you get that back? How do you find that in another package? That's the challenge, I think, if you're in that front office right now.
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, they have a Spencer Strider-esque guy in Hunter Green, and that park tells you how difficult it is to, even be Spencer Strider in Cincinnati. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of similarities there, and Green gave up a lot of homers. It's just a really tough park. So, I think ideally, like, what if they sign like a Jordan Montgomery? It's not my favorite type of pitcher, but it is just like this veteran who's pitched in tough ballparks before, who has a big mix. And, might be able to keep the ball in the park, and seems like, he can put up some innings. Like, I feel like maybe that's a good move for them.
It's kind of funny because I thought Eduardo Rodríguez would get smashed in Cincinnati. He's got the same 5-year home run rate as Jordan Montgomery. They're so similar. And Rodríguez has more innings than Montgomery, too. Montgomery's going to get more money and probably a 5th year, if I had to guess.
That's crazy. And Rodríguez probably struck more people out in the last 3 years.
Slightly higher K rate. Yeah.
Wow. Well, recency bias is a thing, and
it's very real.
And you just heard me sort of succumb to it because they're really similar. 4-pitch pitchers. I guess Eduardo has more of a better four seam than a sinker. I mean, they're really similar. Maybe would you say Jordan Montgomery's secondaries are better than Eduardo Rodríguez's? Yes, probably.
I mean, there's more of them that you like. I think that's that for sure. So I get to see the case where they look similar for a year or two, and then Montgomery is better in years 3, 4, and 5. Like there's a little more there at the end of the contract for Montgomery than there is for Erod. That wouldn't really surprise me if it played out like that. Elly De La Cruz, the range on him in the last week, pick 19 to pick 28. So a firm 2nd round pick.
Everyone loves him
in 15-team leagues. Even if they have a spot that he can call his own before we get to spring training, which seems possible. Are you going anywhere near Elly at that price?
I think so. They're both what? They're mid to late 2nd round. Is any of them in the 3rd round? No.
All of those picks, 19 to 28, that's all 2nd round.
It's all
for a 15-team league.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I saw enough of a change in his plate discipline over time. You can look at his O swing and Z swing by game, and you can see that he basically just swung a little bit less. So it's not super clear because what you'd really like to see is the Z swing stay the same, and Z swing, by the way, for anybody listening that doesn't know what that is, it's swinging at pitchers inside the strike zone, and O swing is swinging at pitchers outside the strike zone. He basically swung less over the course of the season, and I like that because he's a little bit aggressive and he strings at too many stuff outside the zone. But I would have liked better if he'd stayed aggressive inside the zone. So yeah, there's some risk there, but I've been out on too many people like this. The FOMO is too strong for me to say I'm totally out. And honestly, like, I don't think, who are the players like this? Jazz Chisholm, who are some high K guys? I guess you could almost say Bobby Witt in a 2nd year, where you're like,
yeah, early career Bobby Witt, I think is fair.
It hasn't always worked out, but in this case, I don't think you have as much of an injury situation where you have to be worried about injuries. And I think you do have like primo speed and power. And I know he hits the ball into the ground, but he hits the ball so hard that when he hits the ball in the air, it's gone. And so I think, Steamer projection is 246, 20 homers, 30 stolen bases. I think that's light on stolen bases. 31 stolen bases next year when he had 35 stolen bases and 427 plate appearances last season. I think this guy is going to go 240, 25, 50. You're not going to take that in the 2nd
25,
round?
50. That can work. That could still work in the 2nd round.
I mean, it's not the batting average you want, but hey, get Jung Hoo Lee later.
Combining two players with very different tools. Here's a game for you. Better hard hit rate in his rookie season. Elly De La Cruz or Bobby Witt Jr.?
I mean, I think because you asked it, it's Bobby Witt, but I think it's Elly.
It's Elly. You are correct. Okay. 45.9% to 38.6%.
Yeah.
Better strikeout rate in his rookie season. Witt or Elly?
Witt.
Of course. Witt 21.4, Elly 33.7. Better walk rate. Witt or Elly?
Yeah, Witt wasn't a great comparison, but
no, it's okay. It is because the slash line. The problem with an early round player with a low average and potentially lower OBP It
where
scares you.
Put in the lineup.
It just scares you. It absolutely does. It's a totally fair comparison because they both get the power and speed and the things we look for in first rounders.
But they, will a team continue to play them first in the lineup and let them do whatever they want to do if they have a 3 or 295 OBP, But I think in the case of both these teams are, I was going to be really rude. Both these teams are in a place where they want to have these sort of jewel star, this is our star of the future. This is our guy. This is the guy that's going to take us over the mountaintop. They're not going to mess around with that. Bobby Witt has a 300 OPP. I don't care. He's our leadoff guy, or he's a 2-hitter, whatever he is, he's at whatever he wants to be.
Yeah, his OBP jumped by 25 points from rookie year to year 2. I think part of that improvement is just getting the reps. If you mess around with the playing time for a guy like that, how is he going to get better? Like, really? Yeah. I think when you do what Witt did at AAA and when you do what Elly did at AAA, I don't think there's a whole lot you can learn by going back down when you're this tooled up. And I think the other part of it is Elly is a good enough defender where if he's still figuring it out at the plate, great. He's the most exciting number 7 hitter in the game for half the year. You can live with that. And he's still going to steal a ton of bases. He's still going to hit some sick home runs, even if the slash line looks a lot like it did in his rookie year. If it's marginal improvement, that could still lead to a line very similar to what you outlined. So you're in the first 2 rounds, essentially, on Elly. And you may get a dip. There might be a slight drop in that price for a little while if the uncertainty about how this depth chart is going to resolve itself persists.
I think the most difficult decision for me will be, I would love to take 2 starting pitchers in the first 5 rounds somewhere. And I think it will be difficult to be like, it'll be about which types, like what's the would you rather on starting pitchers where he is? Who's a back end second round starting pitcher? So
Elly is, oh man, I like all these pitchers, of course. I like second round pitchers. Who'd have thought? Yeah. He's next to Corbin Burns and Zach Wheeler for ADP right now. I would take both of those guys over Elly at this point for 2024 only. Luis Castillo and Kevin Gossman are also in that round, in that range.
This is why it pays if you are in high stakes leagues, or let's say you care about one league and you say, why would I play any other leagues except for the one league I really care about? Is because you need to practice this. Like you need to kind of almost mock it. You need to mock draft it, even if it's like for a different league you're actually going to play out. You need to see what kinds of decisions people are making. You need to know, like, if I pass on Corbin Burns, what's going to come back around to me on the 3rd? Or if I spend this much on Corbin Burns, what does that mean I can't spend on later if it's an auction? You know what I mean? Like, you need to practice these decisions because, right here I can tell you, I'd probably rather have Burns than Elly. But what if I play these things out and I say, wow, there are so many good second round starting pitchers that, in fact, coming back around the horn, I'd be more excited about the starting pitcher I could get in the 3rd than I would be about the shortstop I can get in the 3rd.
Yeah, so if you're sitting kind of like a mid position in the second round and you're looking at Elly versus Burns versus Wheeler, and you choose Elly, when it comes back to you in the middle of the round, you're probably looking at Kirby, Glasnow, Pablo Lopez, or Zach Gallen as your first pitcher.
Somebody asked me for a top 5 recently, and I put Kirby in it.
Yeah, the Kirby.
I mean, but that might be, a lot of people might be like, ooh, Kirby, I'm going to get him in the 3rd. And then you're like, oh, I waited for Kirby and I got Glasnow.
But that's what I was getting at earlier with like the Mariners. Like they do so many things right in pitching development. They've got guys with great skills and it's a great park and the team's not bad. So all of these things.
Is he really going to come around to you in the 3rd?
Everyone seems to like Kirby. And I think most people seem to like at least the combo of Kirby and Castillo, if not Logan Gilbert as well. And then the price difference compared to Miller and Wu, like those are almost bargains the way they're going right now. So you can get into that Seattle rotation with all these different price points and kind of feel good about it at every single spot. That's what I was trying to get to earlier.
But also, like, if you're playing this game, you're like, oh, take Elly now, and I'm waiting, and Kirby's there. That's great. Well, if it's Kirby and you're not as excited about the other guys, then maybe you should actually take Corbin Burns, because you don't want to do this thing where you're like, oh, Kirby will be there, and then you have to sweat out like 10 picks. You're like, please don't take Kirby.
That's the part of the game of chicken is like, okay, I waited here, but then are there enough fallback options if there's a run for me to be okay? And if there is a run and I have to keep going hitter, or I take a closer and I have to wait and build that rotation later. If I go down to Logan Webb, round 4, round 5, am I okay with some combination of Logan Webb and Fromber or Max Fried or Yamamoto? Like, can I build a rotation around one of those guys and maybe push a few starters up a little earlier? Like, you got to go through the exercise to understand what you're really comfortable with. But just in a vacuum, it's interesting that you're actually in on Elly because of past missteps with players like that. I feel it with Bobby Witt Jr. I was like, no, I got to see it. And it happened. And he was totally fine where he went.
I think the thing that I'm trying to learn is that, like, when you're talking about the elite, the very, very best prospects, actually don't fail that much.
Not often.
We have the like Ben Greaves. Yes, I know those guys exist. That's a long time ago.
Ben Greaves. Yeah. How old was I when Ben Greaves failed? Yeah, no, that's the right name.
Yeah. But normally, in terms of like a top 5 prospect bat, like, we're not talking about a lot of failures since.
Ben Greaves ripped off a stretch from 97 to 2004 where he was at least averaged by WRC plus every single year to start his career.
Yeah.
Well, expectations were higher than that. Man, history has not been kind to Ben Greaves.
Now we just kick his name around like I did.
Now I'm like looking at him like, hey, he was pretty
actually good. You're right. I mean, 280, 28 homers, like, for a couple years.
He'd be more exciting in today's game than he was in that era, because that was an era where everybody was hitting for more power than that.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So, All right, we got about 3 minutes left. We're going to save some injury updates for the next episode.
You're just going to yell a bunch of names at me, and I'm like, I like that guy, I don't like that guy.
I'm just going to yell stuff for the next 3 minutes.
Seth Lugo.
I'm going to limit you to 3 minutes. We'll know about 2 minutes and 45 seconds to wax poetic about Seth Lugo and or Michael Wacha going to the Royals.
Seth Lugo, two really great breaking balls. I think the fastballs are average. I don't know why anybody didn't give him this deal before. I think somebody else should have given a better team should have given him this deal. Maybe this deal is so they can trade him later. Maybe it's just so that they can't develop this guy. No matter what, to me, he's like a above average 3, below average 2. Why is that not worth $15 million a year? Done. Michael Wacha, I don't know. Sure. He's like, I don't know, 100 innings, could be a 4.5 ERA, could be a 3.5.
Yeah, you really hit the gas pedal there. I'd like to extend my apologies to anybody who listens to the show at 1.5 times.
You're right.
Rewind that several times because Eno just went double time on you, and you weren't expecting that at all. Okay, well, I guess we can talk about Lugo for another minute because I thought you were going to use more of that time. The price for him is kind of cheap right now. Pick 266.
I like him in fantasy. I mean, it's Kansas City. Although this is the type of player I get a lot of, and then I lose in wins. He's like how many wins is he going to give you? Like 8?
How high are we going to get on the Royals? How much bounce back are we going to bake into them for the season?
Oh, don't get too excited about it. I mean, it's still not a good team.
It's still not very good. I'm not trying to be rude about it. I'm just trying to say, like, can they be like an 82 win team?
Right now, there are only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 teams below them in projected WAR.
Yeah, I look at this roster. I like MJ Melendez as a cheap outfielder. It kind of fits into our conversation earlier. Hey, where can you get an outfielder that should play a lot?
If Melendez and Massey hit their like 75th percentile projections, that would be pretty huge for this team.
Yeah, it's all on you too. And Nelson Velasquez too.
Oh, and Nelson Velasquez, and if Cole Reagans like keeps it up, then I think they could keep it to they could get to like 81 wins.
I'm laughing because Cole Reagans. We should actually dedicate an entire episode to speculating wildly on pitchers who are nowhere near a rotation that could be like top 100 picks next year. Yeah. Did anyone on any podcast outside of a Rangers podcast discuss Cole Reagans last December?
Oh my goodness. Oh yeah, that's a good podcast. I mean, I had my deep sleepers. Oh, let me see if I can pull it out real quick. Just because receipts are worth it. Deep sleepers, Eno, Sarah's. I think these are pretty good.
This is bonkers. There are not even
dude. I killed it on bats. Check this out. Kepler, Candelario, JD Davis, JP Crawford, Michael Massey, Adam Frazier, Nolan Jones, and Stone Garrett. Dude, I missed 2 out of like 8. On the pitchers, I didn't do as good, but this is it. I mean, you're talking about these are 400 plus ADP. Braxton Garrett, Ken Waldachuk, Mitch Keller, Tyler McGill, Kyle Gibson was okay. Matt Brash,
Brash was great out of the bullpen. It wasn't great for fantasy, but he was very good as a reliever.
Brian Abreu and Tyler Wells. So I think considering like what you're spending to get those guys, I think I did okay.
Yeah. All right.
I will do something similar once I've done the research. You can't just spring this on me, dude.
I just had an idea in the waning seconds of an episode, and I'll give you more than 2 days to come up with it. We got half of a rundown already made for Wednesday, so I think we can safely say that's going to do it for this episode.
I'll have one name. I'll have one deep name for you. Early deep name before the new year. I'll come up with one.
All right. So I think our schedule is one more pod this week, off next week, and then Eno's on vacation the first week of January. So we'll have pods. I'm just not sure who's going to be in the other chair yet. I should probably get on that because these next 2 weeks are going to fly. Give us a follow on X. Eno is at Enosaris. I'm at Derek Van Riper. Follow the pod at Rates and Barrels. If you got a question for a future episode, ratesandbarrels@gmail.com. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Wednesday.
Thanks for listening.